Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Present in the room, we have Sean Clarence, Stan Steiner from the board, and on Zoom, we have two other board members, Nina Lenz and Lisa McGee, and several guests. Our first agenda item is the adoption of the agenda. I will move to approve the February 16th, 2023 regular board meeting agenda. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Do I have any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Our second item is approval of the minutes of January 19th, 2023 regular board meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I would so move.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Do I have any comments, corrections, additions, subtractions? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Public comment on matters not on the agenda. Is there anyone who is online who would like to raise their hand and make a comment? Don't see any. Let's move on. Our correspondence. We have a letter from Curative that is donating the Curative booth that was at the library for about 18 months. Kip, do you want to, is there anything you'd like to talk about this letter?
Well, it was very short. They finally got around to writing the letter that they said they would. I spoke to Abigail about the process, and because of the value of the kiosk that they noticed the value of $1,000, it's fine for just the board to accept it. And we have talked about possible reuses for it. So if the board is interested in us pursuing those possible uses, I would recommend that we accept the gift.
Okay. Well, why don't I move to accept the Curative Inc.'s donation to Teton County Library of the kiosk number KK191. Do I have a second of that motion?
I second the motion of the donation of my she shed.
Thank you, Nina. Do we have any discussion?
That's the cheapest real estate in the valley.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too.
It's competition, we've had stand, coffee, living quarters, so I don't know, you might have to fight for it.
I'm well aware of the fight I have for real estate in this county.
All right. All in favor of accepting the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Does anyone want to pull anything from the consent agenda for discussion? I would like to pull the financial narrative if that's possible. And I have a question. Stella, would you address what's happening now with the county and the information we're going to get from them on a going forward basis on the balance sheet and how we're going about continuing to improve our financial reporting?
Sure. So one of the changes this month, you will notice there is a different format of balance sheet. And that is because in January, I met with County Treasurer Katie Smits. She came over to the library and worked with me on some things with our QuickBooks. And at that point in time, she informed me that the county actually produces a balance sheet for us every month. And in discussion with Kip, the reason we've decided that going forward, we will be using the county's balance sheet rather than our QuickBooks is also tied into our assets that the county has, or the listing of assets that the county has. And in conversation with Katie, I found out that we, the library, do not need to keep a list of assets in our QuickBooks account. And I might also say that some of the assets that we have kept it's almost like an inventory list rather than an actual asset list. And so the county does keep an updated list. Every year we go through a process of confirming what they have for our listing. And so that is reflected on the county's balance sheet, as well as, of course, any outstanding payments that we have, which are reflected on the balance sheet as outstanding warrants. And of course, all our monies that we have with the county account. So it just makes sense going forward to use their balance sheet. In terms of the other documents that we use, the treasurer's report and the expenditure detail report. There has been on occasion, some months where those reports seem to come to be published maybe a few days before the board meeting, and it sometimes makes it a little bit of a rush to get that information reflected into our QuickBooks and our documentation. So there is sometimes a little bit of pressure there, but all in all, typically, I think most of their documents tend to come out about the 7th of the month. So in theory, there should be enough time to produce our library documents. I don't know if there's further questions about that.
Do any of the board members have questions about that? My understanding is that in trying to reconcile our historical QuickBooks and bring them up to the county's reporting system, we are going to, at some point in time down the road, start our QuickBooks over again.
Start from scratch with a clean slate. Our QuickBooks has continued. I don't know how many years we go back, but we have modules that are affecting some of the balances that include payroll, things that we no longer are responsible for. The assets being one of those. So it makes sense for us to start with a clean slate and focus mostly on expense accounts, which is mainly all the library is responsible for at this point. That and our special reserve fund for capital.
Okay, one of the things I would encourage all of us to do is to make sure as we do that, that we be able to do as much of an apples to apples comparison in the new versus old and understand if there are adjustments that have been made to, you know, whether it's an account that's $500 off or whatever, that we actually have that documented, because we're all here and can see this stuff, but who knows who's here in 6 or 7 years and whether that's important or not.
I would also point out that in our current QuickBooks, our previous accounting methods, we had an endless number of accounts, which are difficult to align with the accounts the county has assigned to us. So we will be merging a lot of our accounts so that they align. So we'll probably see fewer numbers of accounts going forward as well.
Does that change how your ability to understand how the library is being managed on a day-to-day basis?
We can still utilize, so the accounts that you see on the P&Ls are internal accounts, and then the account numbers that you see on the county reportings are the county's accounts. Those are broader categories than what we have internally, but we can still assign internally our codes. But what we'll do is really your future P&Ls will actually be showing the county broader accounts,
But we'll be able to drive down into the details should we?
Yes.
should we need to? Yes.
Okay. I mean, I've just from my own seeing things over the last 2+ years, and Dale's got, I mean, I know she's on, and just from what we've been able to witness, some of the subcategories, which made a lot of sense when we were building the Alta branch and putting books into there. I mean, some of the subcategories what we're filling don't necessarily reflect how we're operating today. And I'm looking forward in the budgeting process perhaps to the first realignment of how we are looking at things. You know, for example, does it make sense now to have a Spanish language publication category for media? Maybe not, maybe so, but that's a category that's not on our P&L right now. So, do any of the other board members have any other questions for Stella?
Well, I know this has been a really long process for you, Stella, and it's still happening. What's your thoughts? You think it's gonna be easier in the big picture?
In terms of. So one of the processes that I do, for example, is when we get the treasurer's report. I will run every month a list of each account and verify that the amount that we have in QuickBooks matches the treasurer's report, for example. And then with the expenditures, the check numbers that the county has issued for our vendors, that's what the expenditure report does. So then with that, I go into QuickBooks and I pay those bills with those check numbers. So in terms of aligning our accounts in QuickBooks with what the county is, that will make it a little easier in terms of like flipping back and forth and having to refer back and forth to what our code is, what our code matches to the counties. So it will make those processes a little bit easier to work with. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then I also was curious about not knowing the history with the county in the sense of, okay, they're using QuickBooks. Is this something that's probably gonna be in place for a long time, or next year they're gonna switch to another accounting program? Or what, I mean,
That I don't know, but I can say about a year ago, Kip and I did do a little bit of investigation as to whether we internally, that the library, whether we needed to use our QuickBooks anymore. Oh, and let me just also add, we are on a separate QuickBooks than the county. We're not using like the county's QuickBooks. We have our own QuickBooks. About a year ago, though, we were looking at, since most of what we do is mostly just payment, did we need to continue to pay for QuickBooks, et cetera? And, I was also looking at other accounting software, and we did bring it to the board at one point, and the then board members did ask that we retain using QuickBooks. So just for reporting purposes and so forth. One of the things that we are looking at in this process within the next probably week, we've been using a desktop form of QuickBooks, and as our QuickBooks annual subscription is coming due, we're actually going to go to a web-based version. So that's part of this discussion of also, like, when we do that, we'll probably then at that point, I'll input the county codes at that point, rather than wait till the next fiscal year. And the web-based version will be saving the library a bit of money because also we're using a hosting site for our desktop, and so that even that is about $200 a month of savings that we'll have.
One of my recollection of the discussion we had at the board was continuity of being able to look back at historical financial data from the last couple of years prior was important enough to maintain that apples to apples comparison. So we wouldn't, and that was a very strong factor in trying to maintain the QuickBooks format. Lisa, did you have a question? I'm sorry, thought I saw your hand. Is there any further discussion or questions for Stella? I would move that to approve the February 16th, 2023 consent agenda. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Peter, I can no longer hear you.
I can't either. Yeah,
Sorry,
either. Mm-mm.
but I can hear Dale and I can hear Lisa.
Me too.
Yeah, that's odd, isn't it?
Yeah, no, Peter, we can't hear you. Did someone hit mute perhaps?
You're not muted on the screen.
No.
I'm not lip syncing.
Oh, now, there you
Now,
are.
okay.
You're back.
You look so happy.
I'm sorry, guys. We had, well, I think you heard Lisa, because I heard you say aye. So we didn't drop you except for moving to the next agenda item, which is Alta Branch cleaning contract staff report.
This is the first of two. Next month, you're going to see one for Jackson. But I asked Rick to come in and just give you a high altitude view of this contract, I guess.
Okay, so I assume everybody's seen the staff report.
Yeah.
Basically, the contract was coming to term and it renews next month. So we went through the bid process. Ultimately, white glove professional cleaning was the best value. We had a few no bids. And we had two bids. One was for $29,628, one for $20,500. Even though services may be a little different and I might have a little faith in the other company more, it's a 50% difference. So learning to manage that contract and getting it going, I think will help. Their performance has been marginally adequate. But a $10,000 difference is huge. So I think I can manage that and we can work with it. So the suggestion is that we go with white glove cleaning, to approve the contract for white glove cleaning in the amount of $20,500. Fiscally, the impact would put us, based on what we've spent so far this year and what we will encumber with this contract, $178 over budget at the end of the year.
Does anybody have any questions for Rick? I have one. Did we bid both the Jackson and Alta together, or did we do them separately?
No, they are separate.
And was there any, in your mind, advantage to try to do it together to try and get some economies of scale? Or is it just because of the nature of Alta being in Alta and Jackson being in Jackson?
That's the location difference. That's the big problem. Tying them together, I think, would handcuff us on getting a better contract for Jackson.
All right. I would move that the board approve the award of contractor cleaning services at Alta Branch, white glove professional cleaning in the amount of $20,500 effective.
It begins, I'm sorry,
March
March 1st.
March 1st. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? You guys still hear me online?
Yeah.
Moving forward, we have a public hearing on the proposed policies, unattended children and vulnerable adults policy, the community bulletin board and display policy, and the library gallery exhibit policy. I will take a motion from any of the directors or the board members to open the public hearing.
I will so move.
Could you, by chance, read what?
Oh, right. Please. I will move to open a public hearing for the purpose of hearing comments on the proposed unattended children and vulnerable adults policy, community bulletin board and display policy, and library gallery exhibit policy.
I will second that motion. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Public comment on any of these policies?
We did receive 3 email comments
Yes.
on the policies. One of them was from Jean Ferguson. Her message was not very clear. She wrote, I support both changes, wise decisions, let a library be a library. I don't really know which policies that applies to, so. And then we had 2 very similar, public comments, one from Blair Crumpler and one from Andy Eckel. Expressing some concerns with the unattended children and vulnerable adults policy in the way that the library would handle such situations. They didn't necessarily agree with the process that we outlined. They were concerned with some equity issues and enforcement problems. And I've asked other people from outside the organization to sort of look over the policy with an equity lens, look at the process. And then I think Abigail probably has a lot to say about the process that's outlined in the policy and why it is written the way it is. The comments from other people outside the organization were that this was a strong policy, and the concerns expressed by the two patrons, they didn't see that in the policy.
Well, and we spoke at the last meeting, or at the meeting that we first presented these, about a lot of the process that was outlined. So, thanks. Is there any public comment from anyone that's on the call, on the Zoom meeting? Yes, Nina.
I didn't receive any of these emails in my email. So I just wanted to point that out.
They were emailed to the board email address, so you should have received.
I know, so I
They were
went back
involved.
because to just look at the dates.
They were
and
December.
Yeah, December 30th, right? So I went back to just look and didn't see them, but maybe I'm missing something. And that to just say that I hope somebody responded to them at some level. And if not, I'm
These are
happy to-
public. Nina, these are just public comments. They don't warrant a response.
I know, but
This is-
No, but I think we have a process, maybe it was not done in this time, where we just write back, somebody
I
writes
did,
back and
yeah.
said, thank them for their comments and to be part of the public record.
yeah,
So they know, they weren't sent into a vacuum.
Yes.
yeah. That's all.
That-
That was
That's done.
my biggest concern there.
All right, Dale, do you have a comment?
Mm-mm.
Sorry.
No.
All right, are there any further comments?
How, can I ask how often staff calls related to unattended children or other people in the library? How often does this issue get to that level?
I would say it's not rare, but it's infrequent. And usually it results in contacting the parent and having a conversation with the parent.
I was just gonna add in that, and we discussed this when we draft the language, and it very specifically says that the staff may contact social services or law enforcement if there's a concern over either the safety or welfare of the individual, the child, or the vulnerable adult, or if their behavior is causing problems to other patrons in the library. And we didn't say shall contact. I advise strongly against having an obligation by staff to contact parents first, even though that is desirable and is the current practice, because May does allow them the discretion to decide. But I advise strongly against having a rule that obligated staff to contact parents first, because there are just too many situations that might happen where that would not be appropriate or possible. Or
Often it's not possible.
Often it's not possible. So, so we really, we discussed this for the exact reasons raised in the public comment. concerns about that, but really decided that may was the appropriate word to allow staff the discretion.
Thank you.
And I did chat with library staff at some point about the age of 8. Can you give more color about how that age is decided as the age that can be alone?
It's been a longstanding age in our policy, and if you look at what other libraries have, it ranges from like 7 to 9 years of age. So I'm not sure I don't know the psychology behind that.
I almost want to say, did we base it on a statute too? I can't remember now.
Don't think it's,
Okay.
I'm not.
Not
certain.
because the statute is the rule, but I think we looked at some of the welfare, child welfare statutes with a cutoff for unattended children under other state laws, not because it's binding, just because it's a persuasive cutoff but I'm sorry, I can't remember now whether that was the case.
I know when you get into a certain age, it's the age that kids start to become babysitters and things, so you kind of, and that might be a little more than that, but there is a reason that 8 was chosen. If you remember during COVID, in an effort to keep children lower the attendance in the building, the age was raised substantially, which was a violation of their constitutional rights by changing it so drastically. So we did revert back to the 8, and that just seems to be what Abigail said, and then what most libraries around the same age most libraries have.
Yeah, I do remember, I remember discussions around that, and like, I think it went up to 12 or something. It's definitely a double digit, but I think those are the 2 questions I get the most on the street, so.
Dale?
And just FYI, historically, years ago, when we were looking at the policies, we went around the state and looked at what other libraries were doing. And that seemed to be, the most common age. So there was some feeling that, okay, if it's working other places and we've been doing it, let's stick with it.
No, we're back to not hearing Peter and.
Oh, wow. Did they go away? Huh. I don't know what's going on. Yeah.
I don't know either.
Oh, now you're back. Do you talk about me when this happens?
I'm sure that's it.
Oh,
We need some vocal fry.
Okay. I'll project. We'll move to close the public hearing to take public comment on the proposed adoption of these 3 new policies. Do I have a second of that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, our next agenda item is adoption of proposed unattended children and vulnerable adults policy, community bulletin board and display policy, and library gallery exhibit policy. Do we need to go through all of these highlighted items individually, or can we move forward?
Yeah, if the board doesn't have any changes to the language that has been reviewed and was proposed back in December, then it's just a question of adopting each one with each of the 3 motions.
And for those who cannot see what I'm looking at, there are 4 bullet points: a final staff report, library resolution adopting unattended children and vulnerable adults policy proposed unintended children and vulnerable adult policy, a library resolution adopting the community bulletin board policy and display policy, and a library resolution adopting a library gallery exhibit policy that are all detailed out. My first suggested motion, and then I'll take other motions as we go down. I move to approve the resolution to adopt the unintended children and vulnerable adults policy as presented with an effective date of February 16th, 2023. Do I have a second to that motion?
I would second that.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Do I have a motion for the second proposal? And if I do, they need to read it, please.
I move to approve the resolution to adopt community bulletin board and display policy as presented with an effective date of February 16th, 2023.
Do we have a second to Stan's motion?
Is
I
there
will
gonna,
second it.
is there gonna be discussion? I have a question about it.
I just, so we had seconded, now we have a discussion. Lisa.
Great. Hi. So I just want to make sure I understand the rules because I work for a group that sometimes posts things and I wasn't 100% sure what actually is allowed because it's passive voice. So notices will be posted in designated areas only. Does that mean if I have something that I want to post on a bulletin board in the library, I need to go to a librarian at the desk and ask them if I can post it? Or does that just mean the person posting needs to put it on a proper bulletin board?
Stella manages the bulletin board, and I think it's a combination of both of those, correct?
Yeah, so technically, you could just walk up to the bulletin board. So we have a bulletin board in the gallery area that's adjacent to the restrooms. And then in the children's wing, there's a bulletin board also in that area. A member of the public can just go up and post to one of those boards. But I do know that sometimes I think members of the public also will just bring their items to the front desk perhaps, but you can, yes.
Okay.
And then we look at the board on a regular basis, and if there's anything that would not follow this policy, then library staff have the ability to just remove it without needing. With just removing the item.
That statement is just so the patrons know they can't just come and tack something to, say, one of the trees out here or to the front door or something like that.
Which has happened.
Yes.
Okay, well, if you all are fine with that language, I won't press it. I just think if this is gonna communicate really clearly to the public, I think there should be a subject in that sentence, which is the public, is authorized to post but only in designated areas. And the next bullet about the date seems to suggest to me you do need to sort of check with a librarian. They might put a date on the bottom, or is the public responsible for putting the date on it? I don't know. Again, like if you all think that this is, acceptable, that is fine. It just raised some questions for me because I don't like to break the rules.
We can change this right now. Without changing having to restart the period, is that
No,
correct?
that's fine. The whole point is to take comment, have everyone think about it. So if there are changes that are appropriate, you make them right now, and then, what will get attached to the resolution is not, as was proposed in December, as amended today, right? So any of these can be changed.
So
today
Lisa,
for adoption.
Since
So-
you've studied this closely, what would be the specific change that you would suggest?
Okay, so I would suggest for the first bullet, it just read, the public may post, or the public may post in designated areas of the library. I'd welcome some help with that. I'm not a good wordsmither out loud.
Lisa, does it have to say the public? Is it enough if it just says notices must be may be posted in designated areas only? Just to make it clear that you can only post in designated areas? And then the ambiguity on whether or not you can do it yourself or staff can do it, I think is actually maybe okay to have that ambiguity.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I mean.
I think that,
That's correct about the language, not will be, but. Well, we can say shall be. So. Or, I don't know, what's the less passive voice?
And Lisa, let me understand, if I understand your second comment, it's clarity on who's putting a date on the quote unquote expiration date.
well, those two sort of go together. Yeah, I mean, if I were a member of the public posting about an event that I wanted the community to know about, I think it's clear that I can't post it just anywhere. And I guess if I were taking the sort of open view of it, I'd also put the date on it. I just know in the past with some stores and businesses, you really do have to ask permission. And it seems like maybe this clarification is enough that the library isn't requiring someone to approach a librarian for permission. And maybe because it doesn't say that, we can just assume that, yeah, people can post, however, it needs to be in designated areas.
Abigail?
So I think the first one, you could say shall be posted in designated areas only to make it clear. You can't put it on trees or on the side of the building. Then all notices must have the notation. Both of those leave it open who does the posting and who does the dating. But I think it makes it clear to people who don't want to go to library staff that they can only put it in a certain spot. If they have a question, they can ask staff, and that they are responsible for putting the date on. And then actually, I think the sentence that also needs to be changed is the library has the right to review notices before they are posted on the bulletin board. We just take out before, because actually, if we are not requiring people to check with staff first, then you don't want that before, because you want the staff to be able to go look and see that either it violates one of the rules or it doesn't have the date, and just have the ability to take it down. So if it says the library has the right to review notices posted on the bulletin boards, maybe we could just say for compliance, it could actually be combined with the next one.
That's what I was
thinking. So the library has the right to review notices posted on the bulletin boards and has the right to remove notices at any time at any time.
Yeah, Stella, does
So
that
combine those
effectively
two.
go with your thinking about how this should work?
Yes, but I do want to make, in general, when somebody, a member of the public posts a notice, typically they do not put the date, right? Typically it is staff who then put the date on the notice, or if it's a flyer that has a very clear date, like this event is happening on such and such a date, we typically don't bother to date that because the date
you're
is
gonna
dated.
take it down
Yeah.
when the event's over.
But just to clarify, in general, it's usually staff who do put the date on a flyer. So,
Is it a daily event that somebody peruses that
so
bulletin or the two bulletin boards?
I do it once a week. Typically, what I do is every week internally, the county receives job postings for the county. And so that's typically then when I go to post that, but then I'll check the community board in the gallery. But there's other staff who I know throughout the week, they'll also go eyeball it. So it's just, I try to for sure build that into my practice once a week, but I know that other staff are also checking it periodically. And then in the youth wing, I know that the youth services staff, they check that bulletin board. And then there's also an area at Alta, which, Alta staff. Check that.
Okay, Stan, this is your motion, so I have to ask you if you're okay to amend your,
I could amend or well.
or ask Abigail.
Rescind it,
Bear with me, bear with me for 1 second. So we're gonna.
Just trying to, should we rescind the motion?
Yeah, let's do that, because let's move on to the next one and then come back when Abigail's
Yeah, that's
got
a
the
good idea.
language. In the interest of moving forward, the third motion is I move to approve the resolution to adopt the library gallery exhibit policy as presented with an effective date of February 16th, 2023. Do I have a second to the third motion?
I will second that.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye, please. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Abigail, do you need more time?
Later on, it says the notices posted in violation of these rules will be removed and discarded. So I'm actually thinking we don't, Lisa, I'm thinking we don't even need the where the library is the right. If the library doesn't want the right to review them in advance, and then let's just take that whole sentence out. Because it's clearly not a requirement by practice.
That makes
So,
a lot of sense.
and you have the right, when you see them up, if they violate the rules, to take them down. So I think.
You all sort of cut out, you all sort of cut out again. I think I know where you were trying to go.
First bullet point will say notices shall be posted in designated areas only, instead of will be. Little, I think even lay people will get the shall be. Lisa. Then the third bullet point, you just remove. There's a later bullet point that says that notices posted in violation of the rules will be taken down. So you don't really need if there's no requirement for advance review or approval, which I think you kind of also don't want. Staff are busy, someone comes in, they want to post something, they're not really, they're like, oh yeah, sure, go. So let's just remove bullet point 3.
Yeah, that sounds fine. You cut out when you were saying something about bullet point 2, but it seems like that also, like, people don't know about that. Librarians come through, they put a date there. The librarians have the authority to monitor and change the board. I just think for the public, they just should know they can only post in designated areas, and everything else is really not a requirement of the public. It's the oversight of the staff.
But the staff doesn't always know when the notices get put on the board. So I felt like, it's not that hard for someone the day they put something on the community bulletin board to just put the date they're putting it up on there in case they didn't go to the staff first.
Okay, I just know that, like, if they forget, is that cause for the librarian to take it down?
Yes.
Can you post the rules on the designated space so that someone
Actually,
can write
looking at the
dates
bulletin
on
board.
there,
post is next.
and know?
That would be really great. Thank you. I think that clears it up.
Sometimes it's hard to know how to follow the rules.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think to Stella's point, if it's for an event, November 15th, and they hung it October 15th. Well, actually, no, because I think the rules also, don't they state that you can't post too far in advance of an event?
There is a time period in there, yes,
It does say that, no more than 30 days. in
30
advance.
days.
Yeah.
There are some flyers.
I'm actually want to stop this conversation for a second. I would like to propose that we push this to our next board meeting, this particular, and we leave open, since we seem to be changing this and I'm confused now as to where we're going. And then I'm of a simple mind, I realize. But in the interest of moving forward to with the rest of our agenda, I would like to revisit this at the next board meeting with a final draft that we have, the next regular board meeting with a final draft of a resolution.
Well, I mean, to the extent that we need to talk about the dating, I mean,
I would like to see something written.
but I need to know what to write.
Okay, well, I have Lisa, who has volunteered indirectly to be the subcommittee with Abigail and Kip and other staff as indicated on the final language of this. And if we need to open this up for public comment again, you guys will determine that and we can move forward. Thank you. Policy review, library social media policy. My understanding coming into the meeting this morning is we were going to pull that and not consider that. Abigail, what is the reason for doing that?
The reason for doing that is I wanted some more time because I was concerned that because the library is a government agency, unlike a private business or a private company, you have less ability under law, the First Amendment specifically, to delete comments and control comments. And I wanted to be able to review that. And I did check with the Chief Deputy County Attorney with Keith, and he said I was correct. So I'd like to look at it some more. I would just like people to be aware that when I go back with the staff and work on the draft social media policy, that because you're a government agency, if you engage in social media, then you are very limited in what you can do with those comments. And except for non-protected speech, which is pretty limited to threats, personal information, you cannot take down comments that are offensive or a variety of other things that might be problematic or misinformation. Some of the other county departments, when they were using social media, especially during COVID, they sort of had some guidelines they would follow where when they couldn't delete a comment due to First Amendment concerns, they would respond to them. So if they felt it was misinformation, they would provide what they felt was corrected information, or if it was. So the only things that ever typically get taken down are things that rise to the level of a threat, especially or personal information about maybe, a staff member or something like that. So people just need to be aware of that if you're going to engage in social media, that's one of your limitations, and then we can work on the policy.
Well, let's aim for March if that I know you have a very busy schedule, but let's aim for March to have
March should be fine.
that discussion as well. Moving forward, other reports, director's report. Oh, yes, Dan. Your battery's running low, apparently.
I just wanted to point out that I could not find an agenda on which the social media policy was linked, so you couldn't read it. So I didn't get to read it. And as far as I know, anybody else, I couldn't find one that lets you read it.
Nobody did. We didn't get one in our board package either.
Because Dale, that's because I didn't do the legal review. So.
Oh, okay. All right. I just wanted to bring it up that, it wasn't, for whatever the reason was, which I didn't know that, it wasn't available.
Make clear for the record that it was not included on the agenda because it didn't undergo legal review before it could be presented, and that's why we're continuing it. Is so I can.
It showed up on my draft agenda, which I assume has been changed since I got it.
Thank you.
Other reports, the director's report. Thanks, Gail.
Sure. Couple of things to highlight. There has been a new PTLA, part-time library assistant, hired at Alta, which will allow Alta to operate a little more safely with 2 people in the building at most all times. If somebody calls out sick, you may not have 2, but the goal was to have 2 people in the building for safety purposes. Also to allow Eva more opportunity to do her management of the branch without interruption. So Kaylin Fullerton started this week. So we're looking forward to that. I have mentioned in the past that we had entered into a relationship with the local Wonder Institute, and they are going to help us establish a maker space, which ties in very well with our strategic direction plan. And so the first piece of that maker space will be opening a podcasting studio, recording studio for video podcasting. And that will be in what has most recently been study room 6, which was the location of my former office. And it's, from what I understand, pretty close to being ready to open. So we will do something big and splashy press release, and from what I understand, everybody does a podcast, so it should be a popular space. And I should add that an MOU is in process. The person from the Wonder Institute and I are working on the language for an MOU, and that will then go to Abigail for some review.
I have a question about this, because I assume that if I, who know nothing as a technology Luddite, wants to record and I screw up the equipment, it's not, it's the Wonder Institute that's making sure that's pained in and
That is not necessarily correct.
Okay, so how does this work?
Most maker spaces work in a way that the public is shown where they can learn how to use it. There's a lot of training available on LinkedIn. The equipment is set and locked in some ways that a patron can't come in and just totally mess it up. I am discussing the possibility of having somebody from the Wonder Institute or somebody who's helping them to do some classes with us, so that people can learn. I know Leah's done some podcasting programming this year, so there will be interest, and we'll have to figure that out. But most maker spaces, the staff are not necessarily trained in how to use it. It's the public needs to train themselves.
Thank you.
I love all of that. Just
I do.
I'm just really excited. There's like some of the dreams come true of seeing this space be so utilized in different ways and creative ways. And then this on top of trying the Calico thing, I just think it's great. And I know you're not supposed to do anything for one board member and all blah, 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 but I'm just,
Are you gonna transfer your podcast over to the library now?
I find I regret anytime I
It's pretty.
speak out loud usually.
The next space up will be the room we're sitting in right now. We will be adding some equipment to this room as well, a 3D printer or 2, an engraving machine, some vinyl and fabric cutters, and sewing machines. So this room will be used for what it was probably intended to be used for. Other things in my report, you'll notice monthly statistics has been included now. It was not really easy to include information for the board before on library usage. We worked with a local person to design a better reporting tool for us. And you see the results here. We plug in all the data that the state requires us to report annually. And So when it comes time to do that report, it's just automatically completed for us. And I tweaked what we report to the board and put it in a different fashion than the state. And that's what you see inserted here. So you should start seeing monthly statistics. We've added a prior month and a current month prior year columns, which seem to be the standard for sort of benchmarking where you are from month to month. And I think those are kind of it.
Does anybody have any further questions for Kip on his report? Thank you. Diana.
Yes, thank you, Peter. So the foundation right now, we have a lot of things we're working on, but just to report out, I would like to share that we're working with staff on the start of the fiscal 24 budgeting process. I just distributed Q2 spending reports to everyone to check for accuracy and start considering how they want to spend next year, what projects they want to implement. And I talked with Kip and Stella a little bit about we talked about potentially moving into a grant system, but before we do that, before that's official, we're going to transition slightly by requiring just a little bit more explanation, a little bit more narrative on some of the asks and requests from staff. So that is in the process right now. I also have some spending reports. Kip and I were talking about the fact that I'm sure it would be interesting for you to know what has been spent by the foundation. So I printed out 5. These are just high level reports, but I also have detail. So if detail is of interest to you, and I can email these to Nina and Lisa. If detail is of interest to you, I also have a 17-page detail report. I don't know who wants one. I only printed 3 because I don't know who wants to look at fine print. But
Well, I assume our treasurer does.
Oh, yeah. And Diana, I can pick them up too the next time I'm in town. Either way.
yeah, I can just throw it on a PDF and send it to you via email, so it's easy to read. Super easy. But this is as of January 31. So we haven't finished February yet. So as of January 31, we spending is 158,437, and you can see how it breaks out into the various programs.
Your budget is roughly $400,000 for the year.
467 was the rough.
And I believe we're in the transitional year, how we account for this, from going from where we couldn't see any of this in our P&L statement to a process where the library staff is actually writing grants to the foundation. And the foundation then is considering those grants.
That's not yet been established. We're talking about
You're talking
transitioning
about
to that.
transitioning to
Where
that.
the foundation is writing the grant, or right, they're
Staff
gonna
writes
write
grant.
grant and then we're gonna distribute the grant funds, correct? That's in the works. But I think we're gonna make a slow transition into that as far as for this current, what we're working on right now for the budget.
Okay.
And then also I established starting to send Stella about 3 months ago. We started sending a year to date of the detail of what's going on. And I don't know, is that something you're inputting? I don't know.
So I do need to input that information into our QuickBooks. So
Okay, so
I will be doing that. So in answer to your question, Peter, that was a goal that we were gonna do
that.
this year.
that way you could have a chance to see what all the
Right.
detail is, right? Okay. And then the second thing is that we are super excited about our strategic planning process for the foundation. We just closed our survey. We received about approximately 350 responses to our survey, which was a goal that our consultants had based on our donor database and our supporters list. And so they said with core constituents, we'd like to see at least 25% respond. We did get that, so we're really happy about that. And then we have our planning retreat coming up on Saturday, March the 4th. So you may or may not have received an invitation to come and provide your feedback. It's going to be similar to the libraries, half-day retreat. We'll have a working lunch included, and that's coming up at the Virginian Lodge. Close enough, but because the library's Ordway is being used by VITA. So anyway, we hope you can participate. And then lastly, we're working on our board development. We have one vacant board seat coming up on July 1st. And we are very excited because in the past, early in the year, we talked a lot about how we're really doing some searching for board members. And right now it feels like we have a nice pool of candidates to really consider. And so we're really excited about that. So that's going to be coming up on July 1. And in fact, one of them will be here today to take a tour of the library. So if you're around, I'll come meet you and that will be great. And that's it for me. Any questions?
Any questions for Diana? Virginia, are you? I see you're still on. Are you going to report for the Friends?
I didn't join to give a report, but just to piggyback on what Diana said, we are having our strategic planning with consultants on March 3rd. So we're gearing up for that, and the consultants just recently sent out a survey to us as Friends. So that'll be happening early next month too.
Is your time frame for that process similar? Is your
Yes,
time frame for that process about similar?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on any of these reports? I'll move forward then. Board committee reports of the DEI training. Lisa and I had a very effective committee because Kip managed the whole process for us. We have agreed to additional DEI training for our May meeting, 13th of May, I believe. Is that the DEI? What, I can't remember the specific 16th of May, correct. And it's going to be on radical empathy strategies for inclusive leadership. And we will, it looks like a very interesting topic. So stay tuned. And I am one for, I'm hoping that our board continues to do regular trainings of a variety, on a variety of topics. And I'm very excited about following up our last training with this one. So thank you. And thank you, Lisa, for helping me with this. And thank you, Kip. Now, adoption of Teton County Library Strategic Direction 2023 through 2027. I will open the floor to, we've all received the work of a phenomenally group of people over, I think, over 1,000 comments from the community, over 80 people who have participated in in-person retreats, and a strategic planning committee that has met innumerable times and come up with what I'm very proud of. I'm gonna step back because Kip really has led this effort and with his staff, and I would open it up to the board for comments, questions, concerns.
It was enjoyable to read. I guess you did a really thorough job. I did find one little bit of humor in there on page 6.
Oh, I'm on page 6.
Okay, and if you look at the photograph that you, I thought that was an interesting choice of books that was on display in reflection to what this document is all about. That's just something I think.
The joy of sweat all made up.
The joy of sweat all made up.
Well, I'm a book person, so I was like, oh, that's an interesting book there. But
Well, since we last met and presented some of this to the board, we had only established this 4 overarching strategic priorities, which were community lifelong learning, spaces, and organizational excellence. And several of us in this room were on the steering committee. much praise to Diana, who really did a lot of data analysis for us that really led to what the goals are under each of those 4 priorities. And I'm really excited to start doing this work. Having just shared it with the facilitators from the Wyoming cohort, other people who I've shared this with privately have commented on how powerful, I guess, might be some of the goals that we've set and how much it could change our community. So
I'm very excited about this, especially since a framework is a living way of dealing with a document like this. And the key really is that transition of our goals as outlined into specific actions that can be measured. And it's the first part of this, it starts with the budgeting process that we're about to enter into with a discussion next week and through this spring.
The leadership team has met, assuming these will be the approved goals and priorities. We've identified what our work plan might look like over the next 4 or so years under these. We're a little aggressive in what we identified as what we might want to do this year. We've identified, in addition to all of our current work, 36 items on our work plan. So we need to go back to the table and start to prioritize those items. And we have very little time since we have a budget to prepare and present for next week. But we are going to spend a lot of time over the next few days looking at those work plan and narrowing it down. But
I actually think it's important to individually poll our board on if they have comments. So, or questions or anything else, because this is a leading document that one board that's sitting now is going to pass on to future boards members that are not in this room. Some are, but I really, it's a very important step for us. Nina, do you have any comments, questions, or concerns with what's outlined?
No, not in the words. I think always the issue with these is that you don't make them too detailed and hem yourself in, and don't make them too broad that you can just throw anything at the wall and see what sticks. So, I think that's always a delicate line to go through.
And I think we considered that as we put this document together, Nina, not to put in the really specific items because of that. What if something happens and we can't accomplish that this year or any time in this 4-year plan? You don't want to find yourself in that position where you said you were going to do this and you didn't do it.
Yeah, and sometimes you have a pandemic and you have to use the same document for longer than you thought. So, I think it's a delicate balance. I will say, and this is my mom coming out, so I'm so sorry. The pictures on the side, I love them, but I can't really see them, and I kind of want to see more. So I don't know if there's a way to pull that, make the letters smaller or change where the picture is or something, but I feel like I want to know or see more, have a better, it's hard to get a sense of the full.
It's a competition between font size and
Yeah.
picture size.
Yeah, there's limited real estate.
Yeah, I know. And so I don't know. It's up to,
Perhaps on the website,
The web version.
we can have a website photo album page or something where we tell the whole story with these pictures. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean, or, just include the full picture or something. I don't know. There's just something about it that, seems, especially thinking about the gentleman sitting at the computer, like you can see his arms and his legs, but not his body. So just that is my mom, the copy editor right there, just coming right out. So, but overall, I mean, I think I think it looks really nice. It's inclusive. It is it looks like a lot of the other documents that have come out. I think all of that continuity is always great for people who have experienced the library and want to see a lot of the same documents sort of going forward. So thanks for that. That's a lot of work.
Lisa?
Yeah, so thank you. I wasn't a part of any of this. So just like the DEI committee, Kip, you've made it really easy for me as a new board member. So thanks to everybody who was a part of it. I guess, you know, what a document like this should do is give the public, I think, a feeling of understanding and support. And that's what comes across to me in this document. Like, I really, really love the strategic priorities, community, lifelong learning, spaces, and of course, you know, organizational excellence. So I think it really captures what the library is and sets sort of a vision for how we can improve even in those ways. And it's great, the flexibility I think that's built in to have Kip and your staff figure out what's realistic year to year. We just finished a strategic plan myself in our organization, and it's more of a living document, and it's so easy to say, these are all the things that we want to do in addition to, you know, the 110% we're already giving. So I guess I would just caution to do incremental steps that keep, you know, your staff not overworked, you and your staff not overworked. But yeah, it's a document that I think really celebrates what the library is and where it's going. So good job. Thank you.
Sean?
I think it's a really impressive document. And I honestly, Nina, sorry, I think the use of the photo assets is actually spot on. I really like that design choice. That's me. But more importantly, the content is, you know, it's very well presented. It's very readable, and it, you know, establishes a vision for where we need to go. And I'm behind it 100% and appreciate the hard work that went into it. So, thank you.
Stan?
As I said earlier, I actually enjoyed reading it and sort of helped me understand some framework in the library coming onto the board as a new member. And one of the things that really stood out to me beside that one picture was the word choices. Like under the plans, it would say potential commitment, but these are potential things, then possible ways to measure those. I thought that was just really clever on the word choices. Whoever came up with that was really good. And it's another library. It's an attractive format, and yeah, it would be nice if the whole photos were there, but at the same time, I thought it gave you enough of it sort of gave you a curiosity look. Oh, this is part of it. I wonder what the rest of it is or what else is going on. So that's the way I sort of interpreted the partial photographs, so. And of course, the initial photograph, I loved, I thought that was like perfect, because that really is, what we're about in the way of kids that are ultimately part of, will become our community members. Well, they already are, but in a different venue as they get older, because, I would guess that everybody in this room has some favorite memories from when they were children going into the library or encountering a librarian. So anyway.
I, at the risk of pointing out only one of our many volunteers on the strategic direction steering committee, I have to say, I personally am very appreciative of Grace Robertson, who gave untold effort and kept us focused on a structure, which I think it's easy not to have as much structure when you're having these kinds of conversations. And so I see Grace is on, but thank you very much for all of your help in our process. Well, then I will move that the board approve and adopt the Teton County Library Strategic Direction 2023 to 2027 as written. Emphasis on written. Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
I think Dale has her hand up.
Okay, Dale.
I have a question.
Yes, Dale.
And I'd like to ask Kip, if I may.
Please.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Mhm.
The sound is so strange. Kip, I'm interested in how the staff feels about, in terms of being able to carry it forward, about what I call the accountability aspect of the strategic plan. It's my impression that there isn't quite as much structure in terms of a one-to-one process on decisions. And I do see, and I have read it, and I do see where there are opportunities to have reports. Patron reports was one that was brought up, and I know, of course, the staff are the ones that do this every day. But I'm wondering if they feel that there is, how they feel about the amount of structure in this plan in terms of that. Are we hitting these marks as we go along on a day-to-day basis in terms of what our strategic plan says?
That the process is different than it would have been in the past. So this will be new for the staff as well. They're going to learn how to incorporate surveys into their programs. They will do regular surveys of the community. Maybe they'll have a monthly question survey that they'll conduct. I mean, that staff, from what I can tell, can see themselves represented in this plan. I don't know how everyone feels about it, but there's a lot of excitement among some staff who are excited to do the work. I don't know that I necessarily answered your question, but.
I'm sorry, it was very difficult to hear you. I guess I'm concerned that as we go through the process, and of course, as you did say, I think it is a learning process for all of us with a new plan, that that there is plenty of opportunity for particularly the patrons, but also staff and the board. Of course, I think the board has an edge on having an opportunity to comment, but to make sure that it is easily applicable, I guess, would be my comment about that. But thank you for the opportunity to comment, and I would like to thank everyone for all the work. I mean, I know how much work this is, and it truly is impressive. The timeline was impressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale, I don't know whether can you hear me, Dale? Thank you for your comment. It is going to be obviously, up to the leadership team to ensure that when they implement this, that it's done in a way that staff feels comfortable and effective with. But thank you. So we have had a motion and a second. We've had some discussion. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Matters from board members, library staff, and supporting organizations. I will point out two things in this. We have both a tri-board meeting coming up in early March, and I have a written report to the Board of County Commissioners also for early March. I would, as we know, that these are generally summaries of what has been happening and in the memo to the BOCC. The BOCC apparently has had some discussions about their liaisons and the process they would like to have from their liaisons checking in with their departments. I think it's a sentiment that I have, although I'm on their tailwinds or headwinds and tailwinds, I guess on my term. But the sentiment is they're going to move to a process where they check in with their departments twice a year. And I think, for at least my view, is we should continue the process of informing the BOCC of what's going on a quarterly basis. I think communications and the process that this current board and the prior seating board have done to try and keep channels open have been very well received, and I think it's helped tremendously in our ability to keep what actually is happening at the library away from what people consider might be happening at the library. So that's just at least my soapbox. I'm sorry. So those two things were coming up in early March. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to bring up?
I would just say that the county commissioners held a retreat 2 weeks ago and discussed their areas of focus for the next year or two. I don't remember the four of them off the top of my head. One of them is early childhood development. One is, I believe, internal sustainability, which is environmental and staffing and all of that. And one is DEI, and I was appointed to serve on that group with Scott Miller, the HR director, and Sarah Mann, the general services director.
Housing was in there or not?
No, that's moved on. It's everyone's fully aware of that, and they are working on that. So they graduated it from an area of focus.
That's convinced you don't sleep because you're great for lots of things. The last item on our agenda, well, the second to last item on our agenda is the payment of library vouchers. I will turn my head to Lisa, who is on. Yep.
Sure. Can I just make a note to whoever's taking notes? Maybe that's Lindsay, that the DEI workshop, I think it was mentioned the 13th, the 16th of May. It's actually the 18th of May following.
Thank you.
So just, okay. So we all have that down. And then, yes, I would like to make a motion to approve the payment of library vouchers.
I will second that motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And the last item on the agenda is I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting and remind everybody that we have a special meeting to talk about the budget a week from today. Do I have a second to my motion to adjourn?
I will second that.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
I,
Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you all for your participation and thank you, Dale and Grace and others. I guess Virginia's off for sitting through all of this. So thank you.
thanks,
Before
everybody.
you,